We finally have a brand new and original exotic in Destiny 2, and this one is called the Lumina, or as some pronounce it, the Lumina. And this gun, I'd say, is definitely worth being called an exotic because I have never seen a gun in Destiny's history that actually heals and buffs your teammates, kind of like a Well of Radiance, but any class can use it. Kills with this weapon drop noble rounds that can then be used to heal and buff your allies, in addition to, of course, buffing yourself when you buff somebody else. To use a noble round, all you have to do is hip fire at an ally, and it'll heal them, but it won't heal you, but it will buff both of your damage. So it'll buff your damage and your allies. And after testing this, the hip firing of noble rounds does actually damage enemies, but it's really not advantageous. The round itself travels so slow that it takes way too much time to do that kind of damage, and the damage it doesn't really make up for this fact either. So I would definitely focus on only using these against your allies. This gun is a 150 RPM archetype, so pretty middle of the road in terms of fire rate, and its other stats are pretty average too as well. To start the quest to get the Lumina, you're going to have to go to Shin Malphur's base camp, the exact same one from the Thorn quest, but instead of sifting through the ashes, you're going to go to the very back, open up the chest back there, and that's going to have the quest inside of it. The grind to get this quest done wasn't difficult skill-wise, it was more or less just long and tedious, so be ready to set aside between maybe like 5 to 7 hours to get this over with. That being said, let's answer the main 3, or in this case, because it's an exotic, 4 questions that every gun needs to have answered to know if it's actually worth keeping or not. Number 1, is it good in PvE? Number 2, is it good in PvP? And then, of course, because it's an exotic, number 3, is it worth an exotic slot? And number 4, is it worth the grind to get it? So let's start with question 1. Is this gun good in PvE? This gun is built with support in mind. You can heal and buff your allies in addition to buffing yourself, which I think is ideal for PvE. So because you're able to save a lot of revive tokens as well as be able to add damage to your team, this is definitely going to be a resounding yes for question 1. However, for question 2, is this gun good in PvP? The answer isn't quite as straightforward. In PvP, this gun is better used in a pre-made fire team with communication and at least some semblance of either a strategy or an idea of what you're going to do to really capitalize on this gun. Something I've noticed about taking this gun with a bunch of blueberries on your team is that a lot of times when you try to buff them, they don't even realize they've been buffed, so they don't know to go and push, or they don't know they're being healed so they can go ahead and stop going to cover. However, it does still buff you when you buff somebody else, and you can still save somebody's life who's in the red and maybe doesn't realize they're about to die. So there can be still some benefit there, but is it better to have that than something else? We'll answer a little bit more of that in terms of whether it's worth the exotic slot or not, but just in general, if you have other weapons on you at the time that can really benefit from being buffed, then it can be pretty beneficial. However, like I mentioned before, the stats on this gun are pretty average at best, and it is a 150 archetype, so it's pretty easy to get outgunned by even just a superior hand cannon, let alone something with a different range that either lies outside or far too close for this hand cannon to really shine. So it is a little bit harder to get those kills, even if you are kind of skilled. Furthermore, this isn't even as good as the legendary counterpart to the Lumina, the Rose, that you get during the quest, which you can always pull out of your collections later on. So in terms of just having a gun that is good enough to get the kills in the first place, this definitely does not rank amongst the top of those. Again, if you are pretty skilled, you can still get it done. However, it's going to be a lot more challenging to do. So I think you might find it a little bit harder to use this as a solo player because you don't have your teammates knowing that they have to assist you, but let you get the final blow. Now for question 3, is this worth the exotic slot? We already kind of touched on this earlier, but I'm going to go ahead and flesh this out a little bit better here. This can be worth the exotic slot, especially in PvE if you have other legendary DPS weapons. Like if you have a Swarm with a Raven on, if you have Loaded Question, EP Shoddy, those are all going to be at least some pretty good options to have alongside this, and when they're buffed, they can do a tremendous amount of damage. However, at PvP, it's not always worth the exotic slot. If you're with a team and you've got this planned out to where you have a good strategy, then it is worth the exotic slot. If you are going in there solo as a blueberry, honestly, my opinion is that it is not, but you might have a different opinion. You might try it out and get some good plays anyway, so that part's really more up to you. But personally, I say in PvE it is, in PvP it's not worth the exotic slot. So now let's get into question number 4. Is this worth the grind to get it? Meaning that, was it worth doing the entire quest line just to get this gun? Like I mentioned earlier, the quest took me about, I think, like 6 hours and change with a lot of breaks, and I went kind of slow there and tested some things out. So you can probably get this done in a good 5 hours or even less if you're really efficient. So because the quest wasn't that painful to get through, I don't feel like the gun really has to be game breaking to be worth all of that. So considering the fact that the hand cannon itself in its neutral game is pretty average, it's not terrible, but it's not great. And considering that the exotic perks on it are pretty beneficial in most cases if you use it right, I'd say, yes, this quest is worth getting through. The Lumina is worth going to grind for. Hopefully this helped you decide whether you want to do this quest or not, and if you finish this quest, let me know in the comments below how much time it took you to get it done, and I'll see y'all in the next one.